All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Sunset Rewind, the first boys lacrosse edition ever. And we are here with one of the godfathers of Orange County lacrosse, a longtime friend of mine, and I'm proud to have him on here as my first guest to this show. By the way, my name is Mark Todd, and I'm here with the legendary, now literally legendary, Coach G.W. Mix.
Oh, thank you.
Coach, it's darn good to have you
it's
here.
Great to be
thank
here,
you,
man.
brother.
It's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. And man, I got goosebumps. I'm stoked to have you. So some people don't know Coach Mix and I coached together for a couple of years, but we knew each other much longer before that. I got to meet him the night he met his bride and the mother of his children, Mary Mix, who was a Newport Harbor legend as well and on a pro volleyball circuit as well. And before that, I met him in a college game when it was a very foggy, still night in Philadelphia when he was coaching at UPenn. So, Coach, it's great to have you here. It was great to coach alongside with you. I could tell publicly everybody, Coach Mix made me a far better coach, and I'm super proud of the stuff that you taught me when we coached together.
Thank you.
Sincerely.
I feel the same way.
Sincerely. And all right, so I made a roster, not a roster, but a list of questions to go over, and we're going to try to go improv and freeform on this, but let's start in with a little bit of the background experience, Coach. Tell us about what you're doing, how you got into lacrosse, a little brief history, and what you're doing when you're not doing lacrosse.
Well, I grew up on the East Coast, right?
Yep.
In the great state of Maryland, and
Maryland
most of us who grew up in Maryland didn't play baseball in the spring. We played lacrosse, right?
Yep.
So my dad was a big-time baseball player, was drafted by the Orioles, and my brother and I never played an inning of organized baseball in our entire youth lives, right? So started off playing youth lacrosse and then got into playing high school lacrosse, was recruited and fortunate enough to be able to go to the University of Pennsylvania and play there.
Yep.
And shortly thereafter, I took my first job as an assistant coach at Penn.
That's when I met you.
Which was terrific. And it was a great experience. I postponed law school for a year. Then I postponed it for another year. And much to my mom's chagrin, I kept postponing it and just realized that that's where my passion was.
Was your dad a lawyer too?
Kids. My dad was an attorney in Towson, a criminal attorney. And the plan was to go work for him, and it just it went awry pretty early in the process.
Well, I'm sure us Towson students kept your dad busy.
Yeah, probably. A lot of lacrosse players kept him busy.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
we're having a good time for sure. Let's see. All right, let's go into your coaching philosophy and your team development. I know a little bit about this because I've experienced it firsthand. And but why don't you go ahead and expand about it and talk about like maybe how was it developed from? You've worked with some of the most legendary coaches in all of NCAA lacrosse and pro lacrosse. I mean, you founded the Riptide, a professional lacrosse team in Los Angeles. I mean, no one has better experience and know-how than you. What coaches and along your way formed your coaching philosophy and how you develop your teams?
It's interesting. My dad was my youth coach, and so there was something about that experience that really resonated with me. My dad was a criminal attorney, as I mentioned earlier, and he spent a lot of time taking care of people and helping people. And I wanted to figure out a way to do the same thing. And coaching just became my platform to do what I had seen my dad do for so many years. So if I had to choose one person that I modeled my coaching career after, it was my dad. He was a wonderful guy and treated people the right way, and he was fair and honest, and I just wanted to do everything the same way he had done it as an attorney. And To Kill a Mockingbird was one of my favorite books growing up. And my dad was Atticus Finch. There was no doubt in my mind. Like that was exactly who he was. And
that's awesome.
And so I wanted to try to emulate that as a coach. I have been very fortunate to spend a lot of time with some terrific coaches, guys who coached the U.S. national team and guys who coached at a high level.
Tucker.
And then I had some guys that coached with me that have gone on to coach at a really high level. So I've been around the game at all different levels, youth and high school and college and pro. And I've tried to take a little bit from each one of those levels and bring that to the kids here. And one of the things we did when we first got out here, as you well know, is we started the youth program for our community here in Newport Mesa.
Yeah.
And the idea was to be able to feed both of our local high schools that had lacrosse at the time. And that program still goes on, the Newport Beach Surf Dogs. And we get kids in our community, and they grow up together, and they play together, and then they go off to the two high schools, and they compete against one another, which is terrific, right?
Yeah.
So I just felt like teaching them the game at that youth level was so important.
It was.
And we put a lot of effort and energy into that. We still do. And then that translates and helps them to move on and play at a higher level in high school. And then some of them are fortunate enough, they work hard enough, they get to go off and play it in college, which is great.
Yeah, and some guys have gone on to play pro, like Noah Molnar, who
we
both coached at CdM for
sure.
a while. And then, it's interesting. For lacrosse aficionados, particularly people back east, but for the people in California, Coach Mix has an extremely rich history in the game. It's probably by far no one can even come near it on the West Coast. And so, anyway, I just think, it's been pretty amazing to see what you've done with the tradition of winning at CdM. Tomorrow's Fat Tuesday in the beginning of Lent. And I had scheduled some games that were so hard in the beginning of my seasons that people thought I gave up winning for Lent.
Or gave up hope.
Right. But it's all part of the grand design. Just have faith, and it's all about having faith. So that all came around. Let's talk about some of the your practices. By the way, some of the things you said. You mentioned your pop. One of the great quotes that I'm going to tell you, I stole from you, that I absolutely love was, there's three kinds of citizens. It's first class, second class, and third class citizen. Third class citizen drops some garbage on the ground and walks away. Second class citizen sees it, doesn't pick it up. First class citizen, not his garbage, but picks it up and puts it away. I said that almost once a week at Newport Harbor, and that's directly related to you. And all my Newport Harbor guys will tell you when I was there, they heard that all the time. And they go, "Look, Coach, I'm a first-class citizen." I said, "Yeah, pick it up, put it away."
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, like most coaches, I stole that too. So I stole that from our headmaster at my high school. He was a terrific guy and another mentor for me.
Right.
But that was a big thing for him, and it became pretty difficult as a high school kid to walk around campus and not pick up trash when you saw the guy who was in charge of the whole school doing it every day, all day long.
Right.
If he can do it, I can do it, right?
Coach Mix went to one of the best high schools in Baltimore, Gilman High School, and it's outstanding. It's a lacrosse program. It's one of the top three. It's always Gilman, St. Paul, and Boys Latin. Or the Calvert Hall also. It's in there a couple times. But anyway, that's kind of like in Orange County. We got a couple public schools and we got a couple private schools that are all competing, Tell me about the PS76.
We take great pride in being a community school and a public school, and the fact that our kids grow up playing together as youth players and go on and compete at high school and compete against the best programs in the state, and some of the best programs in the country. And we're pretty proud of the fact that we're a public school. And we have a saying, public school lacrosse, you can't buy it, can't beat it. We get beat every once in a while, but that, most people don't realize that the can't beat it is about the experience and not about the wins and the losses. But we're pretty proud of what we do there with what we have, right? If we need something, we got to make it. We can't go get it.
Well, and that's really developing your own players. You're not going out recruiting. I mean, recruiting lately has become a little bit notorious in Orange County sports, and people are almost unabashedly, just making it happen. And they don't do it through the coach. It's just done through the parent networks, right? And it's how it's done. And it starts with youth and stuff like that, where they start farming. I know that when you and I coached together, we used to, talk about what we're going to do when we're done coaching. Well, I'm finally doing what we talked about. I'm actually refereeing, and gosh, what a PITA I was as a coach, because I know that, now that I hear it as a ref and I'm running up and down the field. But, it's
I haven't had the pleasure yet. I can't wait.
Well, so it's funny. I purposely abstained from doing Newport Harbor and Colonel Lamar games because I don't want anybody to think I have any favoritism or any impropriety, so don't even want to bring it into question. So I've purposely avoided the games and told Sean, the ref guy, not to put me on it, even though they're the closest to my house.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So,
Well, that's great that you're doing that. It's funny. That was one of the first things I did when I first came out here. Right before I started coaching with you from like 2003, 2004 till about 2007. I helped Woody and those guys. I officiated a bunch of games. Yeah. Just because I knew the game, right? And the game was growing out here at that time and was fairly new, and there just weren't that many referees that knew the game. I would argue there's probably still not that many referees that know the game, but
yeah. So we get a lot of referees from football, soccer, and basketball, and lacrosse is a combination of the three, but it does doesn't play like those other three sports. You know,
no, but thank goodness for them, right?
Yeah.
It's like any sport. Like without
they're good guys.
Without the officials, the game just doesn't happen, right? So
yeah,
good, bad, or indifferent, we need them.
absolutely. And I got to tell you, the refs really don't care who wins. No. They really don't. I know the kids seem to think that, and sometimes the coaches will leverage that. It's okay. It's our 10 guys against their 13 because they get the 3 refs, whatever it is, to fire the kids up and get them competing. But just all propaganda. Anyway, so back to we were talking about player development and player evaluation. I know there's been a lot of parents that come to Corona Lamar and they know your history and your legacy in the game, and they're looking for the golden ticket, right? Which, Coach, what was the baseball coach's name? He passed away.
John Emmy.
John Emmy. John Emmy had one of the best quotes ever when we were coaching there at the same time. There was a baseball parent that came up to him and said, what do you think? My son wants to get a couple more reps. You think he's got a shot at the pros? And he looked at his son and he looked at him and he said, you should have thought about that when you married your wife. The meaning being that to play pro, it's just a genetic thing. I mean, you got to have the hard work and discipline, but the DNA really comes into question.
Makes a big difference, for sure.
So tell me about that experience at CdM. And by the way, I mean, your son, Brian, who I got to know pretty well and coach, went to Notre Dame.
Yep.
And played for Notre Dame and did a great job and got a first-class education out of Notre Dame, which is really what it's all about. And your other sons are all excellent lacrosse players too. But I got to experience Ryan. So what is that like? I mean, you kind of set the precedent with him, and then everybody wants to follow.
Yeah, we had a couple. I mean, we had a couple kids that we coached together that wound up. Noah went on to play at Lehigh and did a great job, and then Ryan, of course, at Notre Dame and was the bagpiper and pretty engaged and played in 2 Final Fours. And but we've since had about 30 kids go on and play lacrosse at a pretty high level at places like Notre Dame and Yale and Brown and just Rutgers. Jordan Paxad there and the Krantz brothers, one at Yale, one at Notre Dame.
Blake Burkhart went to
Rutgers and then Loyola. So we've had a number of kids, and what I would say is consistent amongst all of them has been a desire of their own.
Right.
That's what they wanted to do, right? Like there's so many times when you can tell right away it's not the kid's dream, right? And
Boy,
if it's not
isn't
the
that
kid's dream,
difference?
If it's not the kid's dream, it's never going to happen, right? So, that's one of the first things that we talk about is when we sit down and a family wants to talk about, hey, our son would like to go and play at a high level. I said, well, let me hear that from him. And so then he and I have that conversation, and it really has to come from within, because the hours that those kids put in to be able to play at that level on their own, beyond our practices and beyond our film room and all that stuff. I mean, it's hundreds and hundreds of hours.
Right.
And then it's making travel teams, and then it's competing in these tournaments in the summer when it's so hot and it's miserable and you're flying all over. But that's what you have to do to be able to play at a high level in our sport. And those kids, they all had that desire. It wasn't coming from anybody other than themselves.
Yeah.
They're the ones out there on a Sunday morning shooting lacrosse balls in the backfields
What they do.
at CdM. My son Ryan, he used to, at night after practice, he'd come home, do his homework, grab a bucket of balls, his stick, walk across the street to CdM and go out and shoot in the dark.
Yeah.
Come back with half the damn balls. But that was what he did literally almost every night.
That's pretty amazing.
And that's what it takes, so you can tell right away whether or not a kid's got it or not.
It's interesting you say that, because Malcolm Gladwell talked about, like the NHL hockey in the book Tipping Point. He talked about 10,000 hours. And in fact, I think it was around here, one of these banners they have in the studio here. And it takes 10,000 hours. And he kind of pointed out that the kids who were born earlier in the year tended to do better than the kids later because they got more attention because, 6 months for a 5-year-old is a big difference. So there's a lot of growth there, right? So when they're starting. So putting in the hours is important. And I agree with that. One of the things I used to tell them was, you have to identify as a lacrosse player, and not as a person who plays lacrosse, but you have to identify as a lacrosse player. It changes your culture, like of who you are, how you show up. And one of the things that I always think that you always did as a team leader is talking about how they show up, who they are when they show up at practice, right? Who are they when they show up at games? Who are they when they're not at practice, when they're not at games, when they're out in public, right? Talk about that and maybe talk about how that's changed over the years and where you are now with it?
Well, it's probably gotten more frustrating trying to maintain that culture. But we talk about integrity matters all the time
Yep.
at CDM and within our program and within the culture of our program. And that applies to a lot of things. You know, most importantly, it applies to who you are when you're not, when you're not sure you're on stage, right? Like, who are you really? Who are you when you're out in the quad? Who
no
are
one's
you in
looking.
the classroom? Who are you at home when you've got that extra bit of homework to do? And, you know, we've been really fortunate at CDM that we've got a lot of really bright kids and we've got a lot of really terrific teachers. And the kids that want to play lacrosse, the very first thing I say to them, you want to play lacrosse in college, the very first thing you've got to do, you've got to become a really good student. Because, as you know, the unique thing about our game, if you take the top 20 in college lacrosse in Division I,
Yep.
16, 18 of them are in the top 30 of the colleges in the United States, right? So
Yep.
it's just a unique situation. So if you don't do your diligence and get your work done and do well in school, you're going to close down those recruiting opportunities right out of the gate, right? So the better you do in school, the better the opportunities, the more opportunities you may have. So we talk about the academic stuff all the time, and kind of an interesting story, just to give you an example
Sure.
of the Ip brothers who have played for us, right?
Oh, yeah.
So Logan was a player of the year in 2022.
Very quick
Went on-
player.
He's a junior captain at Harvard,
Yep.
right? Kid has worked his tail off academically and athletically, and his younger brother Garrett is our senior captain now, and Garrett's going to Williams, right? So,
Yep.
and he jokingly tells his brother, "I'm the only guy that's going to a better school than you." But you know, those are two kids in a family that just believes in our sport and believes in the opportunity that it can give you. And
Yep.
they truly are two hardworking kids that have gone on and are going to graduate from two remarkable schools
Fantastic
on the East
schools.
Coast.
Yeah,
So,
without a doubt.
And that story is repeated almost year in and year out in our program. It's a terrific one. But it starts with integrity and it starts with hard work and academics.
Well, you know, CDM is an exceptional school. I mean, it's constantly rated one of the top 3 schools in Orange County, and it's a public school. I mean, the parking lot doesn't look like a typical public school parking lot, but that's a whole nother story, you know. But anyway, but it is a fantastic, fantastic school, and you know, the kids are great, and you know, it starts at home. You know, I mean, it really does start at home, and a lot of parents are very involved in CDM. Tell me about, you know, you're doing more things at CDM also. You're now counseling there. And you talk about how that evolved. I think, first of all, what a natural role for you to take
Yeah,
there.
it's been perfect, I guess is the best way to put it. It sadly began when one of our youngest son, Kyle,
Yeah.
who graduated in that fun 2020 graduating class, right, from
My
high
boys
school,
too.
as you well know.
Yeah.
When his dear friend, Patrick Turner, took his
Yeah.
life their sophomore year. And it was really, really difficult. And it happened in January, the start of the new semester. And I was there and I offered to help. You know, I just went into the principal and said, I've got some time between the start of lacrosse season. I had just finished the Hawaii Bowl with ESPN and I had a little bit of time on my hands and I was just like, Kathy, look, I'll do whatever it takes. I'll be here every day until late at night, whatever we need to try to identify kids that need help and need to get to the crisis counselors and all that stuff. So we did that briefly for a couple, 3 weeks, and we began to realize this is really valuable, right?
Yeah.
Somebody who's just there paying attention.
Right.
My old lifeguard training kind of came into play too, right? But just having someone, I wasn't in meetings with the admin team, I wasn't teaching, I wasn't a student going to class, I was just there to pay attention.
Someone who cared and volunteered their time.
Yeah, and to keep an eye on kids, right?
Right.
And then by the end of that school year, between the principal and the superintendent, they came to me and said, hey, is there any way we could make this a full-time thing? And I said, well, the first thing we got to do is figure out how I'm going to get paid because I can't volunteer an entire year, right? I'm a good guy, but I got to pay the mortgage. So we figured that out, and the CDM Parent Foundation supports my role there at school. So I'm the student advocate and family liaison. So essentially it's like being a life coach for kids and families and trying to help teachers and help the administrators and follow up with kids. It's been good.
How has the whole COVID experience profoundly changed? Because one of the things when COVID happened, you know, my boys, like Kyle, couldn't finish their season, and you know, and then things just stacked up on my side where I just pulled back from the game. I couldn't be involved for a couple of years. But I have noticed after taking a few years away, the COVID years, let's call it, the game seems a little different. right? And it does, like it was in 2020, it was so robust, right? And what do you think is the key to getting it back to being healthy like it was?
I think time, right, is certainly part of it. I think the focus has become these club teams and travel clubs.
Like NIL.
But it becomes too expensive for a lot of people to kind of get involved. That's the beauty of the Surf Dog program, and what we're trying to do is, if you can't afford it, that's okay. Well, we got you. We got a bunch of equipment that's been donated that our families, once the kid gets older, they give to us to give to the kids. So, but I feel like, after COVID, the biggest challenge for all of us as spring coaches,
right?
You remember the timing of it all, right? So like the spring coaches, our kids lost their spring seasons, baseball and track and lacrosse, everybody else, and volleyball. Everybody else had been finished, right? And had gotten that whole year.
Yeah.
And then we're off for a few months. Summer comes along, right? We get through the spring, we get into summer, we get into fall. But all of the sports came back at the same time in March and April of the following year. All of them. Fall sports, winter sports, spring sports.
Yeah.
Everything came back at once. So not just on the high school campus, but all across our community and communities around the country, all of those youth sports started up at the same time too. So kids who used to play soccer and basketball and then lacrosse, or soccer and basketball and baseball, they had to pick, because now all of their seasons are all at the same time. They couldn't do all of them anymore, right? So I think a lot of sports took a hit then, and it's been a slow, kind of steady climb back into it. But I really feel like that was the biggest impact, both at the high school level and at the youth level, for our sport in particular.
Right.
Because everybody wanted, they all wanted to play the fall. They wanted to kind of keep them in the order that they were originally in, which makes it challenging, for sure. It's tough.
Let's talk about some of your players at CdM right now. I saw that you played 4 games, but my updated roster here, I have 2 games that you won up against Palos Verdes and Westlake, and then we're missing 2. Tell me about the 2 other games, and tell me about some all-star players.
So we've played 4 games. We had a tough loss to Servite last Thursday night, and I was so proud of Tom O'Leary and those kids. I mean, I've known
Tom's
Tommy
a great
long
guy,
time.
right?
Yeah, he's terrific.
I love Tom.
We've had some epic battles, and back in 2012.
Yep.
We were undefeated, and we played them in the first round of playoffs, and they almost got us.
Remember? Yeah.
They almost got us.
We were coaching together then.
And then we wound up, and we were undefeated, and we won the championship that year. But
that's right.
That was a tough go for us and a tough out. And
2009, they almost got us too. That's the last time we were together serving that.
And so I texted Tom after the game last Thursday night, and I told him how proud I was of him and congratulations.
Yeah.
I know he's been after it for a while, and he's like, well, Coach, it only took me 15 years. But then he shared with me this picture that his dad had given him that was framed, and it had the article from the game back in 2012.
Right.
But then it had a picture of a cheetah that's in the mouth of a bird and about to be swallowed, but the cheetah had his arms out and was choking the bird, right, and just said, never give up. So it just tells you how cool our sport is and how cool sports are in general, right? Because those kids were focused on getting after us and beating us, and I think our kids were, there's no way.
We're looking past them.
And as coaches, you keep trying to tell them, oh, there's a way.
Yeah.
Because you never know what they're doing. You never know what's going through their mind and their preparations and where they are. You know where you are, but you have no idea where they are. And they learned a very valuable lesson last Thursday night.
Well, it's funny. Kids have, this, and many people do, but, high school players, they have this cognitive dissonance and this also reaffirming confirmation bias where, like, they read the stats and go, well, they're better than us. And then they go into the game thinking they're better than us, or this confirmation bias in the other way where they've never beaten us. They're not going to beat us, right? Tell me about some of your guys. Like, so who's been standing out? We're 4 games in. Who's standing out?
So, Garrett Ip, we mentioned him earlier.
Yeah.
Right? He's terrific, and he's been a warrior for us for 3 years, and he's been on the team since, he and his brother got a chance to play together for a year, which is a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
Owen Majit, I don't know if you remember Owen from our youth program, but Owen was a terrific player in our youth program, and then he went back east and went to Lawrenceville School and was there, and just wanted that East Coast sort of boarding school experience and big time lacrosse, and he decided to come home after his sophomore year. So he came back last year and back to playing with the same kids he grew up playing with, which is pretty spectacular. But he's a terrific player.
Right.
And he's going on to play at Bowdoin, which is another one of those NESCAC schools and a terrific school.
Yep. Did Lawrenceville change the way he played? Did it change his perspective of anything? Did he have more respect for the West Coast kids?
I think it made him realize that being a part of something that you have had ties to for a long time is way more valuable.
Sure.
Right? I mean, educationally speaking, it was a terrific place to go to school. But,
Sure.
They recruit kids to come there and play.
Yeah,
and,
like Culver Academy.
Well, like a lot of places,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But he,
Even here in Orange County.
Exactly. But, he just, I think he missed living at home, candidly, with his
Sure.
family and whatnot. Going away to boarding school on the other side of the country when you're in high school is a pretty tough thing to do. But
Yeah.
more importantly, I just think he missed his teammates and missed the kids that he grew up with. And, he's getting new teammates every year at Lawrenceville that are coming from Canada and all over the United States. And
Sure.
it's just not the same thing, right? It's just not the same thing. So that's a big part of why he came back. Dom DeFrancesco's playing in the goal for us and doing a great job.
DeFrancesco, is that what?
Yeah, Dom's great. He's terrific.
Awesome.
But another kid that was a surf dog, and 75-80% of our kids grew up in our youth program.
Is that the taller kid?
No, he's not that tall.
Okay, you had a surf dog kid last year that I saw in a referee that I was refereeing.
Yeah,
Pretty
Truman.
Good. Yeah, pretty
Truman.
good kid.
He's a big, tall drink of water. That kid.
Yeah.
He's funny.
Who do you have coaching with you now?
So a couple guys. So Scotty McGowan, you probably remember
I
Scotty.
remember Scott,
So Scotty played in our youth program and then
Yep.
went on to play at St. Margaret's.
Yep.
And was a terrific player there. Then went
Yeah.
on to play at DU.
Yeah.
He's back in the area, so he's coaching with us. Perry Kraz, I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I love Perry. Salisbury
Perry,
State.
Salisbury guy, started off
Yep.
at Albany.
Yep.
He's terrific, and he's been a coach at a couple of area high schools,
He has been.
Woodbridge and Northwood.
Yep.
And, he does a terrific job. And then Brandon Mayo does a really
Oh,
good job
Brandon,
for us. So
I love Brandon.
we
Yeah.
coached against him and played against him.
Yeah.
And then he went on and played at Concordia and won a
Yep.
national championship there. And
Yeah.
he's great with the kids. He's really good with the individual skill stuff.
Yes.
And then one of the most terrific human beings I've ever been around, Ralph Lopez.
Okay, yeah.
And Ralph was a soccer guy. And one of our former players, Jason Simon, played for his soccer club team. And Ralph just
I
wanted to get
Jason
involved
Simon,
in
yeah.
lacrosse.
Yeah.
And he started coming out and helping us out. He's just a terrific guy. Big part of our culture. Yeah.
Fantastic. One of the things that I've always noticed you to do too. You always took care of the people who don't get noticed. You were always incredibly gracious to the custodians. You treated everybody with class and respect. And I just hope that the other players that you're coaching see that and emulate that as they go along. Let me go through my list of questions here, Coach. By the way, thank you for being my first guest here. Oh, by the way, Coach Mix. You used to run the Pacific Shootout.
Pacific Coast Shootout, yep.
Yep. The Pacific Coast Shootout, which I actually got my first broadcasting launch.
There you go.
On the Pacific Coast Shootout. And those games were fun. Is there any chance of that coming back?
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. We have a kind of standing agreement between Maryland, Notre Dame, and the Shootout that when we can figure out a way for it to come back, it'll come back. But here's the challenge, right? We started that thing because we felt like, and you and I talked about this quite a bit.
Yeah.
The disadvantage that the West Coast kids have is they weren't able to grow up seeing the game played at a high level
And
on
live.
a regular basis.
Yeah,
live,
seeing it
right?
live, yeah.
And so we would be able to go to games all over the place, growing up in
Yep.
Baltimore and in Towson area. And
Yep.
we could go watch Johns Hopkins play Virginia, and we could go watch Carolina play Towson. I mean, you
Yep.
saw some great lacrosse as a kid.
Yep.
And then you go home in the backyard and try to emulate it, right? So I wanted to create that experience for our kids out here. And so
Yeah.
when Ryan was a senior at Notre Dame, Kevin Corrigan, a good buddy of mine, the head
Good
coach
dude.
at Notre Dame, called me and said, hey, man, if you can figure out a way to cover our expenses, we'll bring our home game during spring break against Denver out to California. So we started it that year. All I had to do was pay for Notre Dame because Denver, Billy Tierney was like, hell yeah, I'd much rather go to Southern California than go to South Bend in March.
That's a good point. Yeah, right.
So it worked out great. The first year we had probably 4,000 or 5,000 people there. But then the next year it was like, okay, do we keep this going or do we not keep this
Right.
going? But keeping it going meant we had to pay for airfare and hotels and buses and meals for two teams now,
bigger
right?
deal, yeah.
Much bigger deal. And a lot of people in our community were gracious. They supported it.
Yep.
They helped us. We got people that took care of meals for teams.
Sure,
And,
yes.
and so we made it work, and we made it work for 7 years. And then we had the last one. Yale had just won a national championship. They played Michigan.
Yep.
And literally 2 days later, the whole college lacrosse world shut down.
That's right.
And
I remember that.
it has been really challenging to bring it back. So for 2 years, we couldn't bring it back.
That
There
was the
wasn't
last game of that season,
It
wasn't it?
was the last game. So
That's
that
amazing.
game was on a Saturday,
Right.
and they shut everything down
I
that
remember
Tuesday.
Yeah,
following
that Tuesday, March 13th.
They just shut it all down. And we haven't been able to bring it back. And the main reason we haven't been able to bring it back, candidly, is it's very expensive to fly 2 Division
Sure.
I college lacrosse teams, 50-some people out here, put them up in hotels, take care of meals, take care of buses for 3 or 4 days.
Yep.
It gets very expensive.
Yeah.
Well, now that airfare has doubled, the hotels have doubled.
Right.
And the tickets were already $20 and $30, and we just don't feel comfortable charging people $50, $60 to watch a college lacrosse game, right? So until
Sure.
we can figure out some sponsorship and some greater, higher levels of support,
Right.
it probably won't come back.
We'll have to
But
find a way to
that's
do
the
that.
challenge. But we've got the teams that want to come. They loved it.
If you're watching this broadcast,
Call me
we'll find a way. We'll make it a nonprofit
Yeah, call
situation
me.
or something. We'll find a way.
for sure.
Tell me about your upcoming games. What's the season look like for you? Are there any gotta have games? By the way, first of all, devastated. The Newport Harbor game got dropped.
No, it didn't.
I didn't see it on the schedule. I'm like,
No,
they're not having a
no,
battle of the Bay.
no, no.
Like,
you got to get off. I
Yeah,
told
off
you,
max
you got
preps.
to get the lax numbers.
okay. So who you got coming up? That's like who's next?
I mean, we've got a bunch of we play Bosco tomorrow.
Yep.
Then we've got Jay Sarah, who's really gotten a heck of a lot better and,
Yep.
and a lot more talented than they used to be.
Yep.
And Adam's done a great job there. So, we got all the big boys. We play all the big
Yeah.
boys, right? And we always have. And then we travel and play some more when we go up north. We've got Torrey Pines coming into town here pretty
Mm-hmm.
soon, and going to play De La Salle while we're up north.
Remember we played De La Salle? That was
yeah.
So you guys have to understand. We go out to play De La Salle, and I said, no, Coach, we're playing the JV first, then the varsity. And De La Salle goes, this is our JV, and they had 3 attackmen. All 3 attackmen were over 250 pounds. Remember the JV?
They're big.
They were like offensive linemen. They did just put like 6. It was like having bears cradle around the goal. Our poor defenseman of that JV game. Anyway, that's a robust schedule. That's a robust schedule. What league? I mean, you're still in the Sunset League. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the competition of the Sunset. This is what this is all about. Sunset Rewind. Tell me about what's it looking like in the Sunset League.
I mean, the Sunset League's getting more and more competitive, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's been really cool to see. I mean, Los Alamitos is terrific.
Always, yeah.
They're always pretty competitive, and Newport Harbor's been pretty decent. Not quite the same as when he used to be there.
Thank you, Coach.
But, no offense to the current coaching staff.
Hey, one of my past players. Love you, Blake.
No,
yeah.
Blake does a terrific job.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
Huntington and Edison are getting better. It's challenging that the league itself hasn't grown in numbers. Mm-hmm. And what's been, I think, really
Fountain Valley.
Yeah, I mean, they're just no one else, right? They tried with Laguna Beach, it just didn't work out.
Right.
So the teams that are in the league, it's competitive,
Right.
for the most part. The challenge, though, is growing that, because ultimately, we as coaches have decided we don't want to play 2 rounds of games, because in order to get a high-level schedule, right, you want to make sure you've got those other dates and those other opportunities to play people like Torrey Pines and Loyola and
I
St.
agree.
Margaret's, and it's just hard.
And it makes that game, that Sunset League game, so much more critical. Like so
100%.
so it's not something that you can say, well, we'll get them next time when we got them at home or whatever.
Yep.
So yeah, it makes it. I'm glad that you guys went that way. I do miss coaching. I got to tell you. So, but I know what you're doing. People don't see the hours that are put in. Because you're running a youth league. You're involved with lacrosse at the CIF level too, I believe, right? Mm-hmm. And then all the stuff you're doing in school. What does your average work week look like when you're in season? And break it down film.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so a lot of weekend work,
Yeah.
much to my wife's chagrin, and back in the day, much to the kids' dismay. But
Right.
there's a lot of get up early, get into school well before school starts, and
Yeah.
try to watch some film then and break down film. And Huddle's a remarkable tool, because they help you by doing a lot of it for you. When you send them the film and they break it down, and then you can just go through and kind of separate things out and create the clips that you want to share with the kids. So
Have
that
they
makes
gotten
it a
better
lot
with the
easier.
editing?
They've gotten a lot better.
Because
it's gotten a lot better. It's remarkable.
When I did it, back in 2020, like I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, no, it's better.
Yeah, so they got people
It's better.
who
But
understand
it's
it, yeah.
also only as good as the quality of what you're sending them to.
That's right, yeah.
So that's a big part of it. But, lacrosse, I mean, I would say during the season, it's 6, 8, 10 hours a day.
Without a doubt.
And then the rest of what I'm trying to accomplish on campus. So
Well,
long days.
You're doing good things over to Coach. I know that I spoke with some Newport Harbor parents that were actually people on this side of the bay that are actually sending their kids to the CdM, to Corona Lemon High School because they wanted to be in a coaching culture that you were working with.
That's great.
So that was interesting. What are other, let's see, who are some of the surf dogs we got to look out for coming up here?
Oh, wow. To be honest with you.
Yeah, I don't know yet. Yeah,
Well, no, it's not so much that. It's just that's really not appropriate. to
yeah,
talk about
actually, that's a
because
good question. So
to be honest,
make sure we
so
cut that one out.
Keep that one out because it's just not. I mean, that's
Right.
There needs to be that separation for obvious reasons, right?
Pardon me, I didn't even think about that, but that's a very good point. All right, because I'm just looking at challenges and growth. My last headline there,
Yeah.
right? So that's the only thing that came up with challenges and growth. Let's see. What kind of challenges have you found that it difficult in getting coaches year round, to like do the youth league and to do, and coaches with this culture,
I think there's some significant challenges, right? Particularly for public schools.
Yeah.
Because what's happening now is with all of these travel teams, a lot of these travel teams are associated with private schools and with private school coaches. And so kids want to play on travel teams and they want to play
Sure.
in these competitive tournaments, and I get that 100%, right?
Yep.
So we've been pretty fortunate at CdM that every year the core of our youth program comes to school at CdM. And so 3 or 4 of our better kids are able to grab their 6 or 8 classmates and just pull them along for 4 years, right, and make them better. And that's what keeps us competitive and relevant, right?
Does having the 7th and 8th grade on campus make a difference?
A little bit, but not all of our surf dogs are at CdM, right?
That's right,
Some of them are at some of the private elementary schools
right,
and
yeah.
grade schools, right? So not all of them are on our campus, but
Sure.
it definitely helps,
Like
right?
Carden
Because
Hall and places
they're
like
familiar
that, yeah.
with the place and they're comfortable with it. But I think one of the biggest challenges, though, it becomes for some of those public schools that don't have their own youth feeder program. They're the best kids in their community go and play for some of these travel teams, and next thing you know, they're going to some of those private schools and not going. And I think
And then they
you
lose
probably
ground.
noticed the same thing I have.
Yeah.
Many of the public schools that were really competitive back
Right.
in 2015, 2016, not so much anymore. And it's because they've lost that core of their talented youth that are going elsewhere, right? And without those 3 or 4 kids each year, we're not nearly as relevant and not nearly as competitive as we are.
Right. Well, gosh, I think I'm out of questions, though. How are we doing here, guys? I can create ad lib, and Coach and I can joke here and have a good time. But oh, there it is. It takes 10,000 hours.
There you
I told
go,
you.
for sure.
And I knew I saw that in here before, but I read the book too. So I really did no cliff notes.
Yeah.
Coach, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
It's an
I'm
honor and a privilege.
honored and humbled to be here. So
Thank you,
I appreciate
Coach.
it. Yep, for
Thank you
sure.
so much, man.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Yep.
And tell the whole crew, the boys, and Mary. Well, I actually see Mary at work now. So
That's right. She
yeah.
said she saw you today.
yeah,
actually,
I
right?
ran into her today. I said, I'm gonna have a conversation with your husband tonight on a podcast. She goes, really?
She ran off to go see Hart up at Staples.
Oh, no way!
A brother
Really?
of mine got her some tickets. So
Oh,
she
that's
and her
fun.
brother went up there tonight to go check that out.
Is she wearing earplugs?
I hope so.
Does she drink coffee?
I hope so.
We're getting older. These headbanger concerts, are tough to do.
I wouldn't exactly call Hart.
They're not headbanger, but those guys can rip.
Yeah, they can rip. So she's
Yeah.
excited about that. Looking forward to it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Coach Mix, thank you so much. What are some things that you would advise, young players out there in the Sunset League? I think I know what your answer will be, but I want to hear it coming from you. What's the best advice you can give these kids to improve their game?
Watch it.
Yeah.
I think so many kids now particularly with social media and all the Instagram posts and all the
Yeah.
don't watch highlights. Don't watch that stuff on Instagram. Don't watch all the posts. Watch college games. Watch the whole game. Watch your position
Yeah.
being played at a high level by high level players.
Right.
Throughout the course of a game, and how the game ebbs and flows, and how you go from offense to defense, and what does that player that plays your position do in this situation, and what does he do in that situation?
when he doesn't have the ball.
Exactly. So that that you can tell within 5 minutes, as you well know, you can tell the players that watch college lacrosse and the players that have no idea.
Yeah.
And they don't watch it. They don't watch it at all, right?
Right.
They may look good in certain situations because they watch highlights, but they have no idea how to play the overall game. So that's the first piece of advice, and the second piece of advice is bang the wall. Like the more you play wall ball, the more the best players in the world still do it before every game they play.
It's true.
Most of them do it every day.
Yeah.
But if you're an offensive player and you don't hit the wall every day and you don't shoot 100 balls, you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're never going to be good enough without doing that. So.
Yeah, it is. It's just a game of repetition.
100%.
It's funny. Real quick, to just touch upon that. Kids get butterflies. I used to talk about this all the time. Kids having butterflies before the game, and I said, look, it's just adrenaline. Just like when you're going up a roller coaster, tick, 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 right? Some people are nervous. Some people are excited, right? It's all adrenaline. So it's all your perspective. So when you go over it, if you got the reps and you've done the wall ball and you've done all the work, it's joy.
Yeah, 100%.
Right? If you haven't done the reps, it's fear.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really just the repetition. So I think what you're saying rings true in any sport, in anything in life, right?
And in anything you do, right? You're supposed to be nervous before a big game. You're supposed to be nervous before a big test. You're supposed to be nervous before a big court appearance or before a big meeting with someone who's looking to buy a house. You're supposed to be nervous because you care, right?
Yes.
That feeling of sort of a little bit of angst and a little bit of nervousness, it's because you care. If you don't feel that, that's when there's a problem, right?
Yeah, great point.
But you got to embrace that, right?
Yeah.
Embrace that and just go play hard.
Awesome. Coach, thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
Hey, man. You too.